嗨，大家好！今天的讲座我们很开心能邀请到 Bileam TSCHEPE 以 TouchDesigner 的音像艺术为主题，跟大家分享他是如何看待视觉跟听觉之间的关系，并透过个人的创作计划来具体说明 TouchDesigner 如何成为串联两者的强大工具。那 Bileam 目前主要以柏林为据点进行个人创作，同时活跃于 TouchDesigner 的社群，也长期投入线上教学。那在 Music Hackspace、Patreon 等平台上都可以看到他的身影。那如果想知道更多相关资讯等等，都可以透过 Bileam 的影片介绍获得进一步的相关资讯。那借此也跟大家说明今天的讲座形式。那我们将会播放预录的讲座影片，大约23分钟。那之后讲师 Bileam 也会在线上跟大家进行即时的 Q&A。如果有任何想要提问或是回馈的意见，都欢迎留言在脸书，我们会请口译员嘉伟协助翻译。那现在就让我们一起来观赏今天的讲座影片。
All right, hello and welcome to my talk on the C-LAB Future Media Art Festival. My name is Bileam TSCHEPE, also known as Elekktronaut on the internet, and I will talk about audiovisual art in TouchDesigner today. And I want to start this by thanking C-LAB and the Future Media Art Festival for making this possible and for inviting me here to talk. It's really quite the honor to be able to share my work here. So I'm going to start by giving you a bit of structure, like an overview of what we're going to do in this talk, or what I'm going to do in this talk, and then we're actually going to go into it. So I'm going to talk about me and what I do first a bit, so you just get a sort of rough overview of who I am and what I'm all about. And I'll also then talk about TouchDesigner, which is my software of choice at the moment. And then I go into like audiovisuals and audio reactivity a bit more in detail. And I'll finish this off by giving you a few example projects that I did. And yeah, afterwards we're going to have a live Q&A. So also looking forward to that. Cool. So let me start by telling you a bit about myself. So here on the right, you can see me. Right. So I'm a 26-year-old male from Berlin, Germany. I was born and raised here. And I also studied here in Berlin, and I studied interaction design. So I actually have more of a design background than like a programmer artist background, which I sort of am now. And yeah, pretty much exactly 1 year ago, I finished my bachelor in interaction design, and I am now a freelancer doing YouTube tutorials. So I actually teach people online how to work with TouchDesigner and how to do generative and audiovisual art. And I also do artworks that I share on Instagram. So it's sort of just doing these for I don't know, fun, I'd say, or like because yeah, it's just really nice for me to express myself in art. And Instagram is a pretty good platform to share that. And I also have a Patreon, so there's lovely people all around the globe that are supporting me on Patreon and making it like my journey possible. And I also give workshops online via Music Hackspace, which is like a website. And also I want to expand that more into also giving workshops in person, because right now that wasn't really possible because of COVID. And I'm also giving talks like this one sometimes. All right, so how did I sort of get to doing this? I started with web and graphic design when I was a teen, and I sort of always been, I always liked to sort of teach stuff myself. And I started with HTML, CSS, and some very basic things in like JavaScript and PHP. So that was sort of my first contact with programming. And then I also like experimented around with like CorelDRAW on Adobe and just doing some basic graphic designs, like poster and product design, and just sort of messed around with the computer, also some first music software. So the computer has always, not exclusively, but also always been a tool of creativity or for expressing myself. Later, I actually learned Ableton, which for those of you who don't know it, it's a music production software. And I also looked into Mandelbulb 3D for some time, which is sort of like a 3D fractal creation software. And Resolume, I also did that for like a bit of like live shows, you know, performing live and VJing on stage. And during my interaction design studies, I did an internship. So it was at the studio of another artist called Daniel Palacios, where I really got deeper into like processing in Arduino and really understood like more, deepened my explorations of the programming languages. And later in 2019, then I began working with TouchDesigner because of basically I was trying to like perform on stage with processing, and that was quite a failure. So that's kind of when I thought, all right, I've got to find something new. And I'd been working with processing for like 3 years before that. And so then I discovered TouchDesigner and sat down in 2019 and really started learning it. So I've been like using it for 2.5 years now, roughly. All right, so let me talk about my work now. So it's kind of hard to describe or pinpoint what exactly I'm doing. So as I said in the beginning, it's sort of a mixture of things. But basically I'm doing work for myself that I'm also sharing on the web, and also doing client work with like installations and stuff. So what I'm going to be describing now is sort of the mostly like the audio-visual content that I'm doing. So yeah, basically what I describe my work is audiovisual and generative art. And so I'm going to define these two a bit. So what audiovisual is for me, and sort of different to what you're going to find in the dictionary, I think. Audiovisuals for me are just visual content, usually abstract visual content that really just fits to the audio, so to the music that it accompanies. So we have a visual and we have an audio, and the visual is fitting to the audio and can also be manipulated and changed by the audio. So that's sort of audiovisual art for me. And generative art for me is like, you could also use like procedural or algorithmic art as a synonym. And what that is for me is really like you're making art with code. So you're writing basically a program with code. So there's many different sort of languages, codes, like programming languages to do this. And what I also usually do in generative art is that and a lot of artists do this, include some sort of randomness. So every time you sort of run the code, run the program, you get a sort of different result. It's similar, but sort of different result. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. I also describe my work as sort of self-taught and explorative. So self-taught, I mean, it's something a lot of people in this field do, because there isn't actually, like many like courses out there that teach this. So you basically just go like and look in the web for like tutorials and documentations and stuff, and just try it for yourself. And explorative is sort of, especially when it comes to this abstract art that I'm doing, it's really often, I do have ideas in my mind, of course, of what I want to do. I'm going to come to that in a second. But often I'm just really just trying out, adding operators. And I'm going to explain how I do this a bit later. But yeah, usually it's very, very much about like it's like a fun process. It's about like, it's sort of playful process for me. And a lot of my work is inspired by images I have in my own mind. So it's really just like when I listen to music or when I meditate or something, then I sometimes have these sort of visions, even though it's kind of a big word, but then I want to recreate that in TouchDesigner. And mostly what I want to recreate is natural and organic patterns and behaviors. So patterns that you see, for example, on a tree, like on a tree structure, or like in the water, or when you look at microscopic images or images of the Earth from a satellite, or just a residue of coffee in your mug, something like that, right? There's like organic patterns all around us. So I sort of want to recreate that and connect those to sound often. So here's two examples of what I sort of mean with these organic looks. So this might might be similar to like a microscopic image, and this sort of looks like an eye. You know, there's all these patterns all around us that inspire me. All right, so let me talk about TouchDesigner a bit. And so for those of you who don't know it, TouchDesigner is both a software and a programming language, but it's really it's not a programming language like, you know, probably like, you know, Python or JavaScript or C++ or something, where you actually write a code in a specific syntax. Here you actually have nodes, you have operators, and you're building a network, as you can see down here. So you have all these different operators that you can connect to each other, and yeah, that way you can sort of create visual content, but you can also input a lot of data, you can manipulate the data, and you can output all kinds of data. So TouchDesigner makes it easy to sort of connect it to other software and also hardware. So for example, to Ableton or Unity or something, and then also to hardware like the Kinect or Leap Motion or the Arduino and stuff like that. So you also have the possibility of expanding it with code. So you can add Python and a GLSL, so shaders in there. And it also makes it quite easy to integrate audio in there and to extract data from the audio. And what's really important about TouchDesigner, and I'll talk about that in a minute a bit more, is that it's all real time. So everything you do, everything you process is happening at that very moment. So when you change a parameter, you instantly see the output, like you instantly see what you're changing. And yeah, this is quite important when we're talking about audio visuals. So let us do that, right? So audio visuals and audio reactivity. So generally, when we're talking about audio visuals, we need to distinguish between these two things. So the real-time thing, the like real-time visuals, and rendered visuals. So like sort of a music video. So because let us say we want to like create visuals for a musician on stage, then you know, we're getting data from them. We're getting like the music, the audio data, like into our interface, and we want to like make that change or manipulate our visuals. So in that way, it means like in that case, it means we have to be able to process that audio at that very moment, right? So it has to be real time. And in contrast to that, we have the rendered video. So in the rendered video, where like that's more similar to for other software, like for example Blender or like Cinema 4D or something, where you're actually creating these animations with keyframes, as you can see down here at the bottom right. You can also do that in TouchDesigner. So you change all these parameters. Instead of live, you like make these sort of lines that change over time, and then you can render the video, and then you sort of just have a video that you can replay anytime. So yeah, one says real time, and the other thing is rendered video. So TouchDesigner can actually do both, but it's really focused on real time. Right, so what I personally think is most important about audio visuals is that they really fit to the mood of the song, that they fit to the feeling. So yeah, feel, colors, and motion, I think are really crucial here. Just a very kind of stupid example is that when you have like a very slow, sad piano song with like a sad lyric or something, you're not gonna want to like do really flashing red, bright visuals, right? You're gonna probably want slow, bluish sort of moving, I don't know, visuals. So just as a very basic example, I think it's most important that yeah, your sort of feel and look fit to the mood of the song. But how you can really enhance that is with audio reactivity. So audio visuals are sort of the general term, and audio reactivity describes the possibility that audio, or sort of the technique of audio changing or manipulating the visual. So we can do that in different ways, right? So when we're making a visual, we have different parameters, and we can change these parameters by, for example, a rhythm. So, you know, every song has sort of a rhythm, and a lot of songs, especially when you look into electronic music, which I mostly make visuals for, you basically always have like a kick and a snare. You also often have like hi-hats or toms or something that you can use to change the visual. So you can just extract different elements from the music and use that. And the other thing is we have beats, we have time, right? We have like whole and half and like quarters and eighths. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we can use that, for example, to change the visual as well. Another thing is the frequency spectrum, which in TouchDesigner looks like this. It always sort of looks similar to this. We have like a range of 0 to roughly 20,000 hertz, which sort of represents all the different frequencies and their volume or the gain of the song, basically. So we can extract different sort of different data from this as well. I'm not going to go deeper into this, and it's also kind of hard to work with this in TouchDesigner, but technically we can extract data from that. And then we also have the general levels. So we basically, how loud is the song right now and how much does that influence the visual. So yeah, as I said, audio reactivity can be used to manipulate different parameters and also in different ways. I'm not going to go deeper into that, but yeah, every operator in TouchDesigner has their set of parameters, and basically pretty much every parameter can be changed by audio and by audio channels. And we can also change, like in a music video, for example, we can also change how these parameters affect the visuals by animating them over time. So I'm going to share some projects of mine. So the first one isn't actually an audiovisual, but it's a software that I made inside of TouchDesigner that's also running inside of TouchDesigner. It's called Algorithm, and this software is actually made for audiovisual live performances. So it's a bit similar to Resolume, but it's all about like generative real-time art. So it's not just like VJing where you put different videos together and put effects on it and stuff, but here you really like you can drag in different pre-made visuals, but they're sort of being processed in real time, and you can like extract audio more easily here and just like change the parameters of the visuals quite easily. And yeah, what this basically just gives you is a nicer UI than having like this complex network that is actually behind all of this in TouchDesigner. And you have things like post effects and switching between, like fading between visuals and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to go deeper into this either, because there's also an overview video on YouTube. I'm just going to go quickly into some different videos of mine. So the first one, it's been quite a while ago, I think 1.5 years. Right, this is, yeah, I did this with a friend of mine, or like for a friend of mine who made the music. And basically what I did here, we just have a grid and putting textures on that grid and displacing the grid with the textures. And then also the texture is like audio reactive, as you can see here. Just go full screen. And yeah, that was really fun. Also a lot of work with like animating all these camera movements in TouchDesigner. It's really actually not made for that. But yeah, you can watch this on your own later on. Another thing is I did a few, this is another friend of mine, I did a few audio visuals for him. So he again made the music, and I think this is a good example of not really needing audio reactivity. I mean, there's some audio reactivity going on, but it's really more about the feel and the look and the motion of the creature here that really I think fits quite well to music, and it's really important to make them sort of fit together, right? It's really about creating like a whole. You don't want to have like audio and visuals, you want to have an audio visual, which is sort of one thing. And so yeah, it's quite important that the mood really matches. Right, so another thing is this is a more recent one I did for the same friend as the first one. And this was really quite a huge project, because it might not even look like that, but it's a 5-minute long song. And the thing is, what you want to do is if you have like such a long song with like all these different parts, you really want to like make the visuals fit to all the different parts, right? You want to have one coherent visual, but you want to like change it so it like really fits to the different parts, and the parts in this song are really quite different. So if we look at here, for example, we have like this transition, and then we have a very like a different part than the one before, like musically. So I also had to think about how can you like change the visuals in a way that it represents that huge change. And then we have this sort of drum break here, and yeah, it was really like sort of the process of what I'm doing before I'm actually even starting to create any kind of visuals, that I'm making a list of all the time codes, when is what part, and like how long is that part, and what's happening in that part, and how could I possibly represent that. And then it's a lot about trial and error, of course, but it's not just sort of explorative, but also really quite a lot of like planning and thinking going into this. So again, it's all on my YouTube, so you can just check that out. And last but not least, also thing I did this like this summer. Here I actually got sort of more data from the guy who like he sent me like MIDI notes, which made this like sort of sound representation a lot easier. So I didn't have to like extract it myself, but I could just sort of use the file he gave me, which still wasn't that simple as you might think, but yeah. So again, we had like a few different parts, as you can see here. So again, I try to like keep it coherent, so it's sort of all a very similar technique, but then also making different parts. So that's really kind of the challenge here. And also, you know, like usually both of these songs are really sort of growing over time and getting more intense sort of to the end, and like more epic. So yeah, I have to like try to recreate that as well. All right, so yeah, you can watch all of those on my YouTube. I just want to give sort of a few end words of this presentation. So generally, audiovisuals and generative art are both still rather new and sort of unexplored territory. So I mean, generative art has technically been around since sort of the 60s, 70s. But I still think it's like it's a field that's rapidly growing right now, and it's really like there's a lot of people. It's getting more popular now, and that might actually be a good thing. I'm not sure, because it's also cool that it's sort of still underground. But yeah, it's developing super fast, of course, because we you know, it's based on technology and on like GPUs, CPUs, and all those kind of like sensors and stuff. So because you know those are really like rapidly being developed and changing and stuff, so is of course the artwork, art world surrounding it. So yeah, I think it's really quite the exciting time to get into it, because of these different factors. It's sort of still underground, but it's sort of growing more and more. There's more people asking for this kind of artwork, for installations as well, interactive artworks. And those are all nicely, like you can do those nicely with TouchDesigner, and I think it's a really good time to get into this kind of stuff. Yeah, so thanks a lot for listening. I hope you enjoyed my talk. If you want to check out more of my work, you can visit my Instagram at elekktronaut or my YouTube, Bileam TSCHEPE. And yeah, looking forward to answer your questions.
那谢谢，以上就是我们讲师的分享。那现在我们开放 Q&A 的时间，那如果你有任何的问题的话，就欢迎留言在我们的脸书。
Thank you for the presentations. I think we can now open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave the comments on Facebook, and we'll have the host to repeat them in Chinese.
好，那在等待问题的同时呢，我这边想要做一个提问。是因为当初在邀请 Bileam 的时候，我们就希望能以视听关系为方向来规划讲座内容。 那为了确认我们彼此没有误会对方的想法，所以那个时候我举了 Kandinsky 当做一个例子，那提出音乐跟造型之间的讨论。那从这个地方延伸下去，我想请问，在声音跟视觉的融合表现上，如果说绘画或是平面设计可以从视觉去表现听觉，而像 music video 这一类型的作品，则是从听觉去创造视觉。那针对这两种从不同方向出发的创作，想请问您的转化跟关注的重点会有所不同吗？
So when we discussed about this talk beforehand, we mentioned about we want to talk about the relationship between audio and visuals. And at that time, I gave you several examples here. And I know that in your creative works, you try to fit visuals into music. And in some cases, sometimes the inspiration comes from music, and sometimes you're using visuals to recreate experiences or try to support the audio experiences. So I want to know that when you're creating these works, what kind of perspective or what kind of highlight do you pay attention to? Or is there any differences when you were doing creative process from different inspirations?
Well, generally my process is there's two kinds of approaches to doing audiovisual art for me. So one of them is actually having the visual first. So often I'm actually working on a visual, just doing some kind of free projects, like, you know, sort of like painting, just doing whatever comes up. And then at some point I see like, all right, this would actually fit to some music, and then I try to incorporating music into my project, and also adding some audio reactivity, or just, you know, fusing them. So that's kind of the first part. The other part is, like, for example, when I'm doing a music video, then what I'm doing mostly for my process is just really getting familiar with the song. So really just listening to the song over and over again, and also taking notes, and sort of, you know, as I said in the presentation, also doing like structures on the different parts. And then I just sort of see what comes up. Like sometimes I'm actually working on some kind of technique, and then I see, all right, this would maybe fit, and if I like change it to the song. And sometimes like there's just images or sort of moods coming up inside of me when I'm like listening to a song that I've got to like visualize. So it just depends on the song, really. And the different inspirations, of course, they always come from like all kinds of different sources, like other music videos of other people, of course, as well, or like nature, as I said in the presentation. But it's really, I don't know, it depends on what I'm doing. But often I really also when I have like a concrete idea and I start working on a music video, for example, then often I end up somewhere quite different, because I'm working on it quite a long time, and then I'm like, things change over time and progress, and then it's also like always this kind of progress of talking and like back and forth with the actual musician, right? Especially when you're working on a music video, then I'm always like sending them stuff, and then they give me feedback, and I'm trying to incorporate into the music video. And so it's a lot of different aspects.
在做创作的时候，其实大概可以主要分为两种，一种的话是由视觉来最出发点，比如说有时候在网络上面做这个直播的时候，可能会有这些在做视觉创作的部分。那做完之后，我觉得这个地方这个创作也许可以跟某些音乐做搭配，然后开始去寻找这些适合的音源或音讯等等。那另外一方面的话，就是从听觉出发，比如刚才主持人提到这个 music video 的话，一开始当然会去反复的聆听这首曲子，然后来去做很多我们在简报里面提到的做很多的笔记啊等等，然后去想想看这个呈现方式的结构。那有时候如果我会真的练习某种技巧的话，我会试试看可不可以把这个技巧应用在这次的创作当中，或者是我会透过这些视觉的方式来去反映出我当下听到这个音乐或这个曲子的心情跟感受。所以其实这个时候跟每个曲子或者是每一段音乐的给我的感觉会有所差别。那另外一方面的话，当然去做这个 music video 的时候，如果一开始可能我会有一个具体的想法，但很多时候到最后在做反复练习跟操作还有尝试的过程里面，最后出来的成品可能跟我当时一开始想象是有很大差别的。因为其实在过程里面会有一些时间有时候它会拉的比较长，有时候会有不同的想法出现， 而且我在做这些音乐上面的视觉创作的时候，我也会反复的跟这个音乐人讨论。那我会把我做的尝试呢寄给他们，然后让他们来给我一些回馈之后，我再依据他们的回馈去调整，然后融入在我最后的成品里面。所以其实很多时候一开始做的想法跟最后的成品会有不同的落差，或者是还有很多的变化。这些是我在做创作的时候主要所思考跟针对的2个方向。
好，那脸书的观众有进一步的提问，想请问 Bileam，就是有尝试过反向由视觉产生声音的实验吗？
So we got questions from Facebook comments, and the first question is actually about like generating audios from visuals. Have you done anything like that before? Because we are seeing some experience project that you saw that is mostly coming from music. So want to ask if there anything in reverse you have done before.
So generating audio from music. I mean, yeah. What you can do, you can use, as I quickly showed in the presentation, you can use data like the audio spectrum, and you can literally directly translate that in TouchDesigner. Like you have all these different data types in TouchDesigner. And in this case, for example, you have so-called channel operators, which can handle signals and samples and data like that of audio. And you can use that, and you can like convert that directly into texture or into so-called instancing, which is a technique inside of TouchDesigner. So yeah, you have the tools in TouchDesigner to directly convert that, and then to add post-processing effects and to really change that so you don't see that direct conversion, but you really see a very organic and very directly like an outcome that's directly responding to the audio because it's literally based on the audio.
所以其实在这个过程里面，当然TouchDesigner 你可以汇入各种不同的资料或数据的类型，所以类型很多的时候，在很多时候TouchDesigner 里面会是 OP 单元，那你可以去透过这 OP 单元直接把视觉或者某些特定的内容跟资料的类型，把它转化成特定的符号或特定的质感跟质地等等。那在 Isolator 比如说在这个 TouchDesigner 里面有特定的一些 OP 单元，可以帮助你做这些事情，然后让你可以用这种方式去转化。那有些时候呢，可能也许没办法完全转化，因为它对应的地方如果没有对应到的话，也许就不会有产生出你立即想要呈现的效果。但是的确在 TouchDesigner 里面会有一些 OP 单元可以做到这样的事情。
好，那还有一位脸书的提问是，他提到说，之前在尝试音乐视觉化时，一直觉得解析音乐非常困难，尤其要让音乐中的不同乐器元素分别有相应的即时反应或是视觉效果。那想请问 Bileam 在刚开始制作音乐视觉化时，有针对音乐的乐理或是编曲进行研究吗？或者是您本身具有一些音乐的相关背景吗？
So another question come from our viewer is that when he was trying to visualize music, it thinks it's very difficult to analyze those music because there may be different instruments, there may be different components, that it is difficult for him to create this kind of real-time response or visual effects. So he wondered that when you start to produce this when you try to visualize those music, have you studied music theory before, or have you studied compositions, or do you have any musical backgrounds?
I have not studied anything like that. I did play a lot of different instruments. Yeah, so like over the time, actually, I've played 6 different instruments plus learning Ableton. So I always had like different teachers for that. So I do sort of have a musical background as well, but I never really got the music theory part. Like never really got into that deeply, but I do sort of have a feeling for music because of that background. And yeah, for TouchDesigner and working with the different components, for music videos, for example, I'm actually like I'm asking the musicians to give me like different stems, so all the different tracks of the song. So I'm not just like usually when I'm working with a music video, I'm not working with just one file, but like with 5 to 10, for example. So I have like all the different elements already like prepared for me by the musician. And yeah, so I don't like think about the whole music composition and music theory too much, but I do have a basic understanding of how like samples and stuff works because of my experience in Ableton, and I also have a basic feeling for music and rhythm and all these things, composition, because of my background of playing a lot of different instruments.
我过去并没有去特地的去学这些乐理方面的知识，不过其实我陆陆续续这么多年来，其实学了大概5、6种乐器，然后再加上我学过 Ableton 的关系，那这个过程里面让我对于这音乐跟这些乐器会有一些不同的感觉。而且我其实在做音乐，比如说 music video 创作的时候，我跟音乐人沟通的时候，他们并不只是给我一段曲子而已，我通常会请他们帮我准备好几轨，可能5到10轨不同的音讯的资料，或者这些不同的内容，让我可以去做参考。所以并不是只有单一的音源或音讯而已。这样的过程里面，虽然我没有进入到这个乐理的层次，但是过去这些经验啊，还有我对这些韵律、节奏、旋律的感受，也会帮助我去做这一方面的创作。
好，那我这边也想要再进行一个提问是，我们前几天其实有邀请 Marcus Heckman 为我们概述 TouchDesigner 20多年来的发展，那当中也看到社群对 TouchDesigner 开发的直接影响。那相较于开发者的观点，那我们想从社群的这一端询问 Bileam 怎么看社群跟 TouchDesigner 的发展关系。
So another question we have is that a few days ago, we have Marcus Heckman to talk about the past 20 years of development for TouchDesigner in development from your perspective, from a user perspective. How do you think about the relationship between community and TouchDesigner development over the years?
Well, how it developed, it's kind of hard to say because I've only been in the whole TouchDesigner community for 2.5 years. But I've already noticed quite a change in these years. So when I started, there were barely any tutorials. There were like a few people doing like videos, and there were no like beginner friendly videos, so not a lot of them. So that's really changed in these 2.5 years. So that's already a huge thing. The other thing is generally, I think the TouchDesigner community is incredibly important in the whole process of doing this artwork. So I think without the community behind it, I wouldn't have gotten into it at all, because there's just like, yeah, the whole software is really based on the community around it. It's super important. Of like people sharing their works, sharing free things, sharing tutorials on the web. And I think that's one of the most important parts actually about TouchDesigner. And yeah, it's a super open-minded community. And I think a way that it's changed is also, of course, during COVID now, because so many things happen now online. So it's really been spreading worldwide, which I personally think is super interesting to, have these kind of possibilities like talking here. And generally I'm in contact with so many people from other countries, which I think is amazing. And yeah, that's really been pushed over the last years, of course, also doing online workshops and all these things because of the whole pandemic. Yeah, so in that way, the community has changed a bit, and I think just really in a positive way.
我其实在这个 TouchDesigner 的社群里面大概只参与了2年半左右，所以在这2年半里面，其实我也看到很多不同的变化，包括在过去可能没有这么多针对入门或初学者的这些教学影片，那现在这2年半之后，有很多的新的影片或新的内容可以帮助这些大家能够一起进入到 TouchDesigner 这个世界当中，我觉得这点非常重要。我觉得整个程式或整个这个系统都是依据社群的需求而打造而成的，所以其实社群的意见当然非常的重要。另外一方面是很多的社群成员都会愿意分享，不论是分享这些自由的内容，或者是这些的作品，还有很多的教学，对我而言，还有对很多的使用者而言都非常重要。另外一方面，在 TouchDesigner 当然是个非常开放的社群，我觉得这一点也对我来说影响意义非常深远。尤其是现在在疫情之下的，我们现在看到有很多线上的发展之后， TouchDesigner 的传播跟这个使用的普及率越来越高，我觉得这也是非常特别的一件新的发展。现在有很多新的线上工作坊，或者像现在今天这个情况，我们可以通过线上的方式跟不同国家的人进行互动跟交流。我觉得这些都是在过去1年当中，因为疫情的关系而加速了这些不同的发展，也当然对于 TouchDesigner 的社群而言有稍微的改变，但是我觉得这些改变都是非常正面的。
好，那我这边还有一个脸书的提问，想请问 Bileam 除了从声音跟影像出发的创作以外，是否尝试过从其他感官，例如身体的体感、动作、空间激发的视觉化想象？谢谢。
So another question from our viewer is that you are mainly talking about audiovisual creations. I wonder if there are any other kind of sensory experiences that you are using as inspiration when you create. For example, have you used any kinetic ones, any movements, or any spatial experiences to visualize or create visuals based on these experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so audiovisual is really just one part of my work. I have done some installations, but as sort of my career has mostly been during COVID, like, the last 2 years, or I've really only gotten really into the whole thing and doing this sort of on a professional level in the last 2 years. There haven't actually been that many opportunities to do things physically. I've also had a few sort of live experiences, which, were audiovisual, but of course there's also more to it than just the audio and the visual when you're doing it live. And yeah, so it's a lot of, it's many different parts. I've also I've worked with the Kinect. I've also worked with brain sensors, like you put on your head and they measure your brain waves and things like that. So yeah, these are all things I want to get more into, but then again, there's too many things I want to get into. Yeah, so there's many different parts to it, and I think that's really what makes TouchDesigner so interesting, is that you have all these different parts that you can focus on, and so many tools that you can explore.
其实各位今天看到这些音像的这些艺术创作，只是我工作上面的一部分。那其实我也做过一些不同的装置。不过因为过去这段时间，其实我的事业大概就跟疫情发生的时间差不多，所以过去2年之间我没有太多机会可以做这些实体的尝试或者这些线下的尝试。不过之后我也会想要做更多类似的类似的实验。另外一方面，我之前也曾经做过这些现场的演出。那现场的演出跟创作的时候，这些展演的过程里面当然是跟音像有关系，但是实际上也不只是音像，还有其他感官还有空间的元素等等。那之前也曾经试用过，比如说利用这种感测器啊，去测试自己的去测量脑波等等，所以这些都是我自己很有兴趣、很感兴趣，希望未来还有很多机会可以探索的。所以对我来说 TouchDesigner 是一个非常有趣、有意思的工具，因为它里面有很多各种不同的元素，很多可能性可以尝试。
好，还有一个观众的提问，想请问 Bileam 在创作作品的时候是如何在抽象跟具象的视觉表现之间去调整？
So when you are creating your works, how do you balance between being abstract or being physical or tangibles? How do you balance these two to make it not so too abstract or not too realistic in some ways?
Well, my work is really mostly abstract, but yeah, I don't know. It's also easier to create abstract things with TouchDesigner, but yeah, I'm really all about that. For me, a huge part of why I got into this whole thing is to sort of also realize or visualize what I've got going on in my head, like images that I have when listening to music and things like that. And these are really mostly abstract. And yeah, my main focus is really to, and also what I said before with the with the natural patterns that I want to create. It's really all about, it's mostly about patterns and feelings and things like that. I'm not really interested to create very realistic looking artworks or to create very, I don't know. I'm all about very abstract things, and these sometimes don't make sense to people, and they ask what is this trying to convey, or what is this trying to say? But I'm really about just making abstract things that look pretty to me and that feel good to me.
其实各位刚才看到我的作品里面，我大多数的内容都是做抽象的创作。其实我在创作的时候，大多数是想要把我在听到这些音乐，或者是在思考某些事情的时候，脑海中的画面把它呈现出来。所以这些脑海中的画面大多数都是抽象的。那刚才看到这些简报里面也有提到过，我在思考这些的画面的时候，一部分是取自于大自然。所以其实大多数的时候，我还是主要以呈现抽象为主，我并没有特地的想要 要去透过 TouchDesigner 去呈现这些非常具象或写实的画面。有时候当然大家可能会看不懂，会问我说这样的画面是要试图要表达什么，或者有什么特定的讯息在里面。但对我来说，我只是透过这样的视觉化的图像或视觉化的抽象的这个画面呢，让我去表达我在听到这些音乐，或者是我在当时的时候有什么样的感受跟体验。
好，那我这边也想要追加询问一题，就是您有提到您的学习经验是自学而成，那相信您对于自学者会遇到的困难一定非常的了解。那其实许多观看这个讲座的观众应该也会面临类似的问题，所以不知道能不能请您给自学者一些建议。
So my next question is that you mentioned in the presentation that your learning experience is self-taught, and you probably have encountered a lot of challenges in the process. And I think that some people who are still just beginning at the journey will have similar experiences as well. What kind of suggestions you would have to these beginners?
Well, for me, it's a bit difficult to answer that because I've always been teaching myself things. Like, of course, not solely, not only teaching myself things. Of course, I was in school and uni, and people were teaching me stuff, and that worked well as well. But I've always, like, next to that, I've always been teaching myself things and learning things by myself. So it's a bit difficult to say. So it's just very natural to me to learn things and teach things to myself. Well, like, there's two main things that I noticed, or that really helped me to learn by myself. And one of those is actually to really, like, it sounds a bit weird maybe, but like, to really love what you want to learn and to be really, really deeply interested. And I think this is one of the things where, like, schools and often universities really fail at. You have to learn a lot of things that you don't actually want to learn. And I noticed with what I'm doing now and all these new tools that that I see that exist now and that I want to learn, it's really more about, like, now it's all about, like, I love learning and I love the work that I'm doing, and I'm really deeply interested in that. And I think that can really, really help to just overcome and to really stay with, I mean, what it's super important to really, there's going to be many annoying parts and parts where you feel stuck, but you just have to, like, sort of really sit down and keep going if you're deeply interested in that. Another very concrete thing I noticed is that people don't really do the research often. I noticed that in workshops that I'm doing, and generally people writing comments under my videos and stuff. It's just I always, when I'm, like, I really learned that from HTML and CSS. As soon as I'm stuck, as soon as I have a problem, or if I don't know how to continue, I Google, like, I really Google a lot, and looking through the forums, looking through some kind of help groups, asking people. It's really, like, a lot about this learning part. It's about researching and reaching out to people, and not just sitting in front of the tool and not knowing how to continue. And the last thing that's really important to me that I quickly mentioned in the presentation is meditation, because I think it's really important to have this sort of practice where you focus your mind on one thing and not get distracted. And that really helps me to not even have these blockades anymore. Now I've done this now a few years. I've been doing this a few years now, meditation. So that is really, really helping me to keep going and to be motivated to realize what I have in my mind, and to see things. Like, when I see things in nature and things like that, I just have this urge sort of to create that, and then to learn the tools that I need to learn for it.
其实这个问题我要回答的话没有这么容易，因为其实在过程里面，我一直以来都非常的喜欢自学。那在自学的过程里面，其实我除了这个大学，当然在学校时间的时候，我有很多老师教学的接受老师教学的经验，那这个过程也很好。可是其实我自己非常习惯自学，所以我一直以来都非常的喜欢，有兴趣的事情就开始自学。那我在自学的过程里面，我觉得有几点非常的重要，我可以给大家分享给大家作为参考。第一点是，我觉得其实对于这个事情要保持热情跟兴趣。那当你对于这样的事情有兴趣、有热忱的时候，当然就会这种学习的动力就会变得非常有自发性，而且面对这些新的工具不断的出现的时候， 如果我有兴趣、有热情的话，这些问题就变得好，这些困难就会变得好像不太是困难，而是一个我希望能够去克服的事情。那当然有时候会有卡关的情况，可是透过这些的方式之后，如果你有热情的话，当然就会愿意去找到这些解决方案，而不会就是发呆盯着这个电脑荧幕看，而不知道该怎么办。那另外一方面是，其实我觉得在自学的时候，这个研究的动力也非常重要。我在做工作坊或者是看我的作品的底下留言的时候，都会遇到很多人，其实他似乎没有做任何的 Google 搜寻，就直接来问问题或者是做评论。我觉得这个过程里面，我在自学的过程里面，不论是学 HTML 或者其他的程式语言的时候，我都非常的强，非常的重视要去网络上搜寻。如果遇到任何问题的时候，我就去搜寻，或者去到论坛里面去请教别人，去发问等等。我觉得这些过程里面都可以帮助我克服跟解决很多在自学里面的难关。那第三点，其实我刚才在简报里面有提到过，是冥想的部分。我过去几年来开始练习冥想之后，帮助我能够让思绪变得更加专注，不会分心，然后呢，也会让我更加的意识到厘清我到底要做些什么事情。那透过这样的过程里面，其实也会让我有更多创作的动力。比如说我走进大自然的时候，看到大自然里面这些不同的画面的时候，就会有动力想要在 TouchDesigner 里面把它重现出来。这些是我在过去这么多年来一直维持自学习惯的时候，所可以跟各位分享的经验。
好，那因为时间的关系，我们的讲座到这边就要告一个段落。那非常谢谢 Bileam 的参与，那也很谢谢我们的口译员协助，那也很谢谢线上的大家一起来参与。
So due to the time constraint, I think we'll close the sessions. Thank you for participation and thank you for all the viewers for your attendance as well.
All right. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's really been a pleasure to be here. And I hope to come to Taiwan at some point in person.
好，也非常感谢各位今天邀请我来出席，也希望很快有机会可以亲自到台湾。
好，那我们就到这边告一个段落，大家拜拜。
Thank you, bye.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye bye.